Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of Friday Waters, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank built as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to today's session. Friday Waters is a continuation of signature series Wednesdays for Water. The activities initiated as a series in Friday Waters include Water Talkies, Water Reading Club, Water Thesis Club, Water Arts, which is today, and Meet a Maestro. Each of these sessions takes place once a month depending on availability of our speakers. The idea of Friday Waters is to bring water knowledge available in various alternate platforms and forms at one place to highlight the opportunities and challenges related to water. The idea is to also increase the outreach of the alternate water practices in the water networks as well as in the society at large. The Friday water sessions are designed to be fun-filled and yet fruitful to learn about the water matters in different ways. Do keep following us at www.w4w.in for regular updates. As we focus today on water arts, the idea is to bring the artists, speakers, guests who are today here, who have been doing or already have done some kind of art forms to this in order to discuss their making of the artwork and the issues around the subject they have covered around water. Besides bringing interest in water conversation, this will also help us to understand how water can be understood through different ways. My name is Mansee Bhargava, and I'm the host for today from W4W. And this session today is actually co-hosted by Living Waters Museum, and today's session is all about Goa water stories. In Goa Water Stories, it's a series of work which our guests are going to talk about. And today we have the introduction session. We have with us Dr. Sarah Ahmed, Dr. Sebastian Morris, and Ria D'Souza. The beautiful website of the Goa Water Stories is highly recommended place. Do visit. I'm going to share that in the chat box as well. So thank you so much, Living Waters Museum, as well as Sarah Ahmed, who is a dear friend, to actually accept this to conduct a series for which we are going to have the introduction session today. And before I invite them to take on the session here, I will like to invite actually Dr. Sarah Ahmed first to talk about Goa Water Stories and other aspects. But before that, a humble introduction of this wonderful person whom I have been knowing for quite a long time. Dr. Sarah Ahmed is a researcher and founder of the Living Waters Museum, a hybrid museum of water heritage in India. The Living Water Museum, as we call it LWM, is a digital platform that invites explorations of research-backed storytelling through art on the relationship between water, culture, gender, community, and many more aspects. Sarah joined ICER Pune in October 2020 as an adjunct faculty. With a huge body of work that Sarah has, it's a pleasure and honor to have you not only as mentor, but also a speaker on our platform again. So welcome back, Sarah. May I now invite you to also let us know about what Living Waters Museum is and what Goa Water Stories is about, and take on the responsibility of the session from here on. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mansee, and I hope I can be heard. If
yes, you are heard.
Any time I can't heard, please someone raise a hand. So it's great to be back on your very, very long, extensive and conversation, Mansee. I mean, you've really done incredible work as well. So Living Waters Museum, for those of you who are new to us, it's a hybrid museum started in 2017, initially as an online repository curating stories on India's water heritage, both the natural heritage, the built, and the intangible around rituals and practices. And from that, it grew into a space for engagement with local communities, with schools, with students, in cafes, in stepwells, in classrooms, all over the country, really. And when the COVID 2020, when the lockdown started, we started working on urban waterscapes because we were very interested in the links between water and public health, especially the messaging on hand washing. So out of that grew our chapters on Bombay, on Pune, on Jodhpur, and on Calcutta. And about 2 years ago, we started working on Goa. So Goa is a state, it's not just one urban area. So it's taken longer to put together this really huge piece of work with 18 contributors, 3 institutional partners, many more resource people and experts involved in the creation of this. The lead curator, Wency Mendes, and the design and development lead, Trusha, unfortunately cannot be with us, but this really is their hard work, and of course the work of many people whom you will hear over the next few months. But what I want to do now, before we invite Sebastian and Ria to speak, I want to just show you how the website functions with the help of Utra from the Living Waters Museum, and just a little bit on the navigation and the richness of the content, and also why Goa. So Utra will take us through some of the introduction part of it, but Goa is on the base of the Western Ghats. It's one of the 34 biodiversity hotspots in the world, and it has 38 east-flowing rivers and 22 that flow into the Arabian Sea. So it is really the intersection of water and land, which constitutes Goa. Of course, for most of us in India, Goa is a place where, you know, you go to the beach, you go to reflect, you go to have fun with friends, but it is much more than that. And that is what this project is about. So maybe if we go to the landing page, Utra, and then we can look at some of the work over there, and you can open some of the buttons there.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. I hope everyone can see my screen. Good evening, everyone. This is the landing page for Goa Water Stories. As you can see, it's a very visually rich website. Once you click on the button that takes you to the home page, you'll see this rather interesting interactive map with different icons that take you to the various stories on the website. I'd also like to point out that this homepage can really be divided into 4 components. The first, of course, is the map with the various icons for the stories. The second over here is the blueprint, or what you can also call the curatorial note, which Sarah will go into detail in a little bit. The other section is what's called geo stories, and when you click on this, you can sort of divide the icons on the map based off of their geographic location. So for instance, I'm clicking on Western Ghats, and it sort of takes you, highlights the 2 stories on the Western Ghats as they relate to this website. Give me one moment. I feel like my internet is acting up. Sorry, guys.
So I'll chip in, Utra, once you figure out how to get out of that box. Yeah. Oops, something went wrong. Do we have Mansee?
I have it.
Okay.
So Uttara, can you close your? Yeah, it's all working now. Your slide is working. Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Apologies for that. I just want to take you through what the website, the homepage sort of represents. As you can see, these really interesting icons over here. And the color scheme of this website was sort of inspired by earthy tones, mostly the color schemes of this coastal region, as well as ancient Portuguese tiles, like the mosaic tiles. And when you hover over these icons, you can see what the story's title is. Like here, this is the impact of tourism, and you'll see who's written these stories. It's an easy navigation to go and read the story. Additionally, there's also ambient sound on the website, which is taken from various parts of this region. So for instance, I'll click on this now.
It's the sound of rainfall, which
it's the sound of rainfall and sort of builds under the storms and coastal weather. I'm gonna pause. There's also a reading transcript if you click off on this for people who would rather listen to a story or who are unable to read a story on a website. That's also an option. The menu bar on top will take you to the various stories, the About Us page, which gives you a little bit of a description of who is involved. And Sarah will go into that later. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Blueprint, which is a curatorial note, and allow Sarah to go through this.
Hi. So maybe what Utra is going to do is just take you through the blueprint, but it's a very long thing. You can see that it takes almost 48 minutes to read it, and I obviously don't have that kind of time, but it is very rich in its description of water resources, the land in Goa, the kind of threats to Goa's biodiversity, the climatic uncertainty with unseasonal rain and very intense short days of rainfall, the different types of land use patterns, particularly the Kazan lands, which are unique to Goa. And these are marshy lands that have been reclaimed and where there are bunds that manage saltwater ingress. And these lands have been used for agriculture, they're owned by local communities, and so on. So there's this huge, rich ecological, agroecological biodiversity that is Goa. And this underpins all our stories, right? Overlaying all of this is the work that the entire project and all the researchers and fellows and artists who were involved engaging with local communities. And this has been very important to the Goa process, the work, really creating stories from the bottom up, working with communities ranging from fisher folks to those who do the oyster pane, the very typical glass work that you see on old homes in Goa, to working with children in government schools, local schools, in communities, taking them through their own ecology and all, and of course, working with artists. So there's a rich diversity of collaborators who came together through different stages in the project. The first stage involved the Goa Institute of Management, the School of Public Policy and Governance, headed by Professor Sebastian, who will be speaking after me to say a few words about what that partnership meant for them. And through that, we selected 6 fellows for an open call. And then gradually, as the project got going, we reached out also to Goa University. We involved some of their master's students. So that was a lot of work with faculty to have students recommended. It's further down, Utra. The students from Goa University then worked with artists from Sunaparanta. The Sunaparanta Center for the Arts is based in Panjim. And so that was one more collaboration. And then the third set of content contributors came from young people who really joined many of the workshops that we held over these 2 years. So we had online mentoring, we had workshops at Goa Institute of Management. The participants, the fellows were taken to a wildlife sanctuary in the Western Ghats. They were able to interact with different water experts and architects and all from Goa during many of these things. So it was a very intensive process, led largely, I would say, by Mansee Mendes. And really, that's how you have this kind of depth of stories that we do, and the sort of very visual, rich work. I think what's also very key to the stories and how they developed is the use of different multimedia and interactive tools, rooted in ethno-visual research, rooted in anthropology, and also in the sharing of information. So consent in terms of working with local communities, research ethics, how do you create inclusive stories that are sensitive to the local environment, and how do you bring in this diversity of voices? So all of this is very key to the community building process that is at the heart of the Goa Water Stories chapter for us. I'm not going to say more about it at this point because you will be hearing all the contributors over the next few months. And you will hear about, what they went through in creating their stories and creating the artwork that went in their stories and mapping different things and so on. But I want to just say that, what we're really keen is, the creation of the exhibition is a process in itself, but it doesn't just end by launching the website and having this beautiful production over there, because we do want to engage now with furthermore with schools, with academic institutions, again, with communities in public spaces and all, and of course with galleries and museums and art spaces in Goa, to showcase some of this work in a physical environment and to create space for those conversations to happen. So that's what we're working on now with partners. We're looking to see how and where can we do this and who will support us in this work, because the Living Waters Museums has only seeded this project. It is really about how does it embed itself in Goa, how to go in, how does the Goan community respond to it, and how do we look at, take it from there. So I'm going to stop speaking right now and hand over to Professor Sebastian Morris, who is the head of the School for Public Policy and Governance at the Goa Institute of Management. And I've known Sebastian from his days at IIM Ahmedabad. And so was really wonderful to be able to collaborate on this with him and his team. And they came on board, I think, in May 2023. They were our first institutional partners. And I'll let Sebastian say a few words about that and what it meant for them, and also to give us an understanding of some of the water challenges that Goa faces. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Sarah. Professor Sebastian, please unmute yourself. Thank you, Sarah. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Also, thanks to Uttara, Mansee, and Ria. So first let me say that at the Goa Institute of Management, we had started the Center for Public Policy and Governance. Now you'll notice that there is a term governance, usually not, kind of appended to public policy. Now the reason for that is, of course, very simple, that in India, you can't just be talking about public policy. But when you do talk about public policy, you have to worry about the nature of the government, the capabilities and competencies within. So that's the general theme, and that's why we have that title. So when Sarah approached us and said that, look, this is what they would like to do and would we like to anchor it, we were most keen on that because we saw this as falling very much within our domain in a sense. Although the style and the approach is that of art, we still see a lot of synergy with the Living Waters Museum and particularly with the work that was done as part of the Living Waters Museum for Goa. Okay. Now, let me just say that this was anchored by Professor Kinshuk Sarkar, my colleague, and let me thank him for that. And Bernice, who was our coordinator for this project from our side. So that's important, and let me put it down. Okay, so now let's come down to this. Let me talk about my own personal aspect, relationship with water. Before that, let me say that, as a young fellow, I remember, I got introduced to rock climbing, mountaineering, and trekking. And that these were early days, actually, for young people in India to get involved. But from then on, this whole engagement with the mountains spread, went beyond the elite schools, and became rather ubiquitous. And it may have been one of the important reasons for a strong environmentalism which has developed in India. But the environmentalism is seen in terms of forests and mountains, not so much in terms of water. And we may be critical of that environmentalism by saying that perhaps it's a little too elite, and all that is a matter of detail. But the fact is that today in India, there is a strong surge of support for protecting our environment and ensuring that things don't go completely awry. Now, so I would believe that this emotive, artistic approach is the beginning of a deeper engagement of younger people with water. Where they see water as something very interesting, sacred, something which can provide them with adventure, and something that they should protect, quite like the earlier generation thought of protecting the mountains and keeping those places relatively better than what they would otherwise have been, and engaging them with the mountains through treks and so on have become very, very common in India. And today India houses more mountain climbing trekking clubs than possibly any other country in the world. Okay, so I hope that one hopes that with this kind of initiation, lots of people will worry about and form clubs to engage with water. Now, talking of engagement with water, our engagement as a society with water right now is perhaps much is missing there. We see waters as some obstruction to cross in the city. Okay, why the hell do we have this river flowing through? It requires us to build so many bridges, and the boundary of the river itself is very, very badly used. I mean, it becomes a kind of a cesspool and the first point of collection of the waste, and so on. Of discharge and so on. So water has become the unregulated common, particularly rivers, for disposal of all kinds of waste. Okay. Now, this is in a society where actually rivers were worshipped. Very few other societies would actually name gods after rivers. But yet the condition of our rivers in terms of misuse is something absolutely remarkable and makes us all ashamed. And therefore, the artistic and the emotive starting point, I think, is very, very important. Yeah, see, besides this, there is really at this juncture not too much of an emotional connect. Okay? We see water as a society as something that we can extract out. Okay? And something that we just purely extract without worrying too much about how we maintain it, whether the sensitivity that is required to engage with that. So when we build dams to extract water for irrigation, which is a fine thing to do, I mean, provided it's done the right way, we lose so many of the other things that the river could have provided. For instance, we often lose the river itself. Okay, then the navigation of the river is lost. So you do one thing, you lose the other. Whereas elsewhere in the world, this is not the case. Okay, when the Western world and China engaged with rivers, even in the modern times, they actually enhanced the value. Okay, so it's possible actually to to extract, I mean, to get huge values out of a river, out of water, and at the same time, okay, to enhance the ecological value. These two are seen in contradiction today in India, and for a reason that's what you actually visibly see. But when you see this, you're unable to see what could have been the case. Okay. Now, Goa is very interesting because my sense is a lot of people come to Goa because the environment is still not as messed up as elsewhere in the country. Okay. And a large part of that has to do with the water, I mean, and the greenery. Okay. Yeah. So, things like, say, river training in India has a very shallow meaning. It just means that, okay, let's manage the river so that it doesn't burst into the nearby floodplains or into the towns and villages around. That's it. Okay. There's nothing more. So river training doesn't mean that I manage the river properly, ecologically, ensure a greater stay of the water through the seasons and so on. You know, how do I use it for navigation? How do I combine it? How do I use it for entertainment? How do I use it for actually enhancing the economy? And these things have all been done in other Asian societies and in some of the societies in the Western world, and most notably in China, where you have even entirely canal towns and so on. Okay? There are at least 5 canal towns where the entire mode of transport is actually rivers or river waters, on a scale perhaps equal to, if not larger than that, of Venice itself. Okay? So waterfronts, which allow people to engage with the rivers, are, as I said, cesspool. Even the older ones done during Mughal or British times have been reduced to cesspool. Now that's something very tragic. Okay, so we have a long way to go, and I see, the emotions that the Living Waters Museum, and particularly the Goa project, can evoke as being very, very important. Okay, and Sarah has been saying that this is something which is a community aspect. That communities need to come, and I don't think we can overemphasize the role of the community and of the state in the management of water, because it's essentially a common resource. Okay, and therefore we need stronger community bonds to come, and that is somewhat difficult in India because habitat communities today are not the Indian norm. We are broken up into caste, into religious and caste communities. But whereas the proper management of a river, or for that matter, any space, okay, including the land, requires community effort, which means habitat. So we being weaker there, an emotive approach which brings the people together, which is something that runs through in the Living Waters Museum projects, can be very powerful. And Goa, in a sense, has been able to do a little better than others because the habitat community here is somewhat stronger than in other parts of the country. And I would emphasize. So, we see this as being very important. We have an organization called the Goa Development Group. It's a free association of a large number of people who are worried about Goa and its development. We don't want to push development in a way that hurts the ecology and the people. We want development, but let it happen the right way. And there are possibilities and so on. So that's what we aim. Now, I'll come back to this point about governance. You see, besides the way we misuse the water use efficiencies remain very low. India produces a kilo of rice with about 6,000 liters of water. China does that with 600, and the US does with 2,000. Okay, so the water use efficiency in India is also very low. So there are so many problems which are stacked up. They require a kind of a major change in our approach. It just can't be a kind of a blind engineer's approach of construction. There has to be a recognition of many more things, of the interconnections and so on. And I hope those things will come in the future. And the Living Waters Museum would be instrumental, even if a small part, of initiating that kind of change. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thank you so much, Professor Sebastian. Over to you, Sarah. Yeah.
hi, thank you so much, Sebastian. And I think it's really important that we think about the macro political context as we look at water and community engagement as well. So that's really, really important to bring in those points. I want to hand over now to and welcome Ria, who has joined us all the way from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, right, Ria?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
in Sweden. And Ria's got more than a decade of experience as an architect, and she's currently working on her Masters of Science in Conservation Architecture. And Ria has been not only a contributor to the story, she's also been one of our mentors. She's helped us a lot with some of the graphic work earlier on when we were launching the open call. And I think you've been very involved over the last 2 years in different capacities. And you were going to help us moderate the some of the webinars coming up as part of the Goa Water Stories. But right now, I think you want to talk a little bit about some of the work you did in this platform.
Yes. Yes. Thanks, Tara. Thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Right, I hope everyone can see it. All right. So without giving away too much of information, I'm going to take you to one of the projects that I was involved in, which is called What is a River? Now, like Professor Sebastian was saying earlier, is that he was talking a lot about infrastructure, and we were a group of architects, three of us, Manisha, Siddharth, and myself, and it was also in collaboration with the Goa College of Architecture, where we decided to, over a span of one semester with the students, we decided to sort of ask this question, what this means to architect, because we were trying to sort of get to the junction of built the built environment and the river, and in many ways we were trying to use the tools that we were familiar with. So as architects, we had sketchbooks with us, we had looking at maps, we had our phones, which is now something that we always carry with us. So there was photographs, there was audio, there was um, different kinds of photography involved, and there were interviews that we used. What we did was we selected one sort of area of the river, which was accessible to us. So since we're situated in Panjim, the college was in Alpine in Panjim, and we took the watershed from of this part of the river, so nearer to the mouth of the river, and we through through an initial sort of overview from maps, we were like, okay, these seem like hotspots where the built environment and the river intersecting. So we, like, if you look at the screen that I'm sharing right now, there's the junction of the fishing docks at Malam Jetty. There's the Beti ferry, there's the Panjim ferry across, there's the Panjim market, which is also infrastructure for goods coming from the river. There's the lighthouse, and there is also on either side of the city, there are both the fresh water ponds. But what does this have to do with the river, really? You know, what is a river in this context? So I'm just going to fly down to one of the projects. So yeah, so the whole map is also made of like these little quadrants. And what you see is you see the terrain. So we're trying to sort of look broadly. We're trying to zoom out a bit, you know. Okay, so even if we're concentrating at Malam, where number 10 is currently, and all the boats are docked, we're trying to see what this means in context of the landscape. So you're seeing that there's the hill at the back, and all of this is now flowing down into this area. And what we sort of, just to give you a hint of the process, is we divided the students into groups. So one group would only do photographs, one group would only take soundscape, one group would only be sketching, and one group, so you have like, you're going like sort of scanning the environment, you're looking at it through different aspects in the tools that you're comfortable with, and you're sort of scanning the environment and you're trying to map it in these different ways. And so what that means, what I feel, what the learning that we sort of got through it, was that there are so many perspectives behind this one particular angle that you're looking at. So if we open from the Malam fishing jetty, I'm going to mute the sound. So besides just looking at the boats and the way you're also looking at like the embankments. You're looking at what is this retaining wall that has been put over here in this junction. What does that mean outside it? And there was also a group that was doing only flora and fauna. So they were only clicking just the flora of the area and the fauna. So it would be the shells, the cubes that you see over there. Cubes in it's a type of a shellfish, and uh, you're looking at boats, you're looking at the bridge, because the bridge is also part of the infrastructure. You're looking at so many different things, and at the end, what you get is you get something that is a very layered sort of a map. And through through this process, we sort of we sort of went we go back into um, we zoom into different areas. So at the bottom of here, you see like the quadrants. You zoom into different areas. You sort of studying the layers that make this, and um, and all in all, like we were trying to also sort of understand what, like through history, we were looking at historical layers, like the map. What did this jetty look like a couple of years ago? Many years ago, what part of the river was this formed from? And we had students also just sketching the area and sort of grouping their sketches. So just little scribblings in the notebooks become uh, become an insight into what this particular area could be and what it means. And so then when we're looking at one particular site, like for example, this is one of the Google Maps, and if I look at this base of the hill, and it's VRM 2014, and in 2023 you see it's been dug up completely. And what does that mean to the river? What happens to the runoff from that hill? What happens to the catchment areas? What happens to the fishing communities at the base of the hill? It goes to explore many more questions than just your little site and your site boundaries and what your site then means in this whole context of the river. So so we started off through the elective, and through it we also, as the mentors and as people who were learning through this process, we saw much more. So, and at the end of it, to look at all of the data, so it's more of an open end. When we're asking what is a river, it's also more of an open-ended question. It's a question that is free to be interpreted. And we did speak to a few people also who gave us their ideas of what a river is. And yeah, so this was a little bit of an insight without giving you too much, because there's going to be a separate lecture on this. So without giving you too much, just the process of how we went about doing this sort of a mapping, I would say, of what the river is.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ria. I mean, I know you wanted to just give us a glimpse into your story and also show how these stories unfolded. I mean, the creation, the process of developing that, of working with the students and getting students to reflect on the meaning of water and the meaning of flowing water for them. I think that's a point that Sebastian also brought up, how do students learn about the water values? And that's very much, this ethical focus is something very much behind the work that Living Waters Museum does, and also the global network of water museums, of which we are a part. We're founders, one of the founders. And I think that's really important. And now I'm going to hand this back to you, Mansee, for questions from the audience here or from the audience on YouTube as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah, Sebastian, and Ria, for these wonderful insights, and Uttara, of course, for taking us through the website. But as rightly mentioned by Sarah, that the gist of the work is not the website actually, but the whole process which the younger people especially went through to experience and touch upon. And I will take one line from what Sebastian was talking about before I open the floor, is to connect with people. I mean, how will we understand unless and until we connect? And he was talking about his childhood and youthful days and how things have changed. And I think this approach in the Goa Water Stories is an opportunity for the younger generation to look at science, technology, nature in a very different way than the conventional classroom education. And I think the most important aspect, which you have been always talking about in your work, Sarah, and Sebastian also made a point about it, is making a water community. I mean, how to build a water community. And I think Goa Water Stories in the long run is going to set an example. If water education is not in the mainstream, given that situation, how do you build a community? I mean, we are in a country where still water is not taught as a subject. It is just a side entity in some larger subjects. which is okay. But then if people who are really concerned and want to really improve water education, how do we do that? And Goa Water Stories, the moment I actually came across this work, Sarah, how I have been so influenced by it. And honestly speaking, I'm still not done with the website looking at it, because you need time to, I mean, you can't really actually read one story in one day. I will say you have to really sit with the person who has built that story. And that is exactly what we are trying to do in this Goa Water Story series through with Living Waters Museum, that we would like to hear the artist or the scholar out. As Ria presented in very short, the work of 2 years, of course, cannot be presented in 10 minutes, but still at least that it can be a small gesture to understand what they went through, what they experienced, and also give them this sense of collective action. Apart from that, yes, you are now getting connected to the larger water community, which you are also trying to build, which W4W is trying to build, a larger water collective or community. And it is extremely important because, after all, we are a minority in the country, in the world for that matter. So in that minority situation, how to really keep the youth also motivated towards it, how to keep them in a situation that they understand that there is water which needs to be appreciated, apart from getting scared about its crisis. So I mean, I actually have a question on the water collective or a community that Living Waters Museum is trying to build. And a very naive question before that is, why not Goa Waters Museum and why Goa Water Stories? Because for me it was natural as Goa Water Museum and becoming part of Living Waters Museum. But that's a naive question. But Sarah, now you have been building communities in Jodhpur, Mumbai, Goa, Pune, Kolkata, and many more. And I want to convince you for Chhattisgarh sometime very soon. Um, what kind of opportunities do you see working with the younger generation? And what are the challenges to sustain this community? Over to you.
Am I unmuted? So each of, I mean, I want to say at the outset that the work in Goa would not have happened without the deep engagement and all the effort that someone like Mansee put into it, right? For each of these chapters, you do need a local champion. You do need someone who's going to do the dog's body work, the running around, the putting together of people. I can be a back end support and a mentor and come in, for workshops and meetings and to meet and engage and all that. But really, there has to be someone who is willing to champion this. And that someone like Sukrit Sen in Calcutta or Mansee in Goa, that is really critical to the success of these chapters. Pune, I mean, in places like Pune, we are now engaged with the riverfront, communities and all the agitation that is going on over the riverfront development. And at some point, we would like to build an archive of what the river meant in Pune before we lose it, with all the construction work that is going on. And so that's something that's happening in Pune. In Jodhpur, I can't say the same about building a community there, right? I can't say that a physical brick and mortar museum may not engage in the same way that an academic institution may want to engage around water. So that, and obviously in Bombay, and with the work that we did here back in 5 years ago now. So we are finding opportunities to now engage, for example, this year with the Kala Kokora Festival. We did panels, we brought our Jal Katha. So we do have the East India Dastan Goys working with us and working with these chapters. I think you've heard them speak in Delhi.
Yes.
I've seen it is on the screen. So they did something, I know it, Development Alternatives. And the East India Dastan Goys have done Dastan Goys for us in Jodhpur, Calcutta, Mumbai, and also in South India somewhere. I forget where now. And we're trying to see whether we could, I mean, Dasan Goi may not really be the culture of Goa in the same way as it is of North India. but we could think of something there. So those really help engage with people. But building the community really depends on these key individuals, key people who want to take this work into classrooms, into education for children or universities, you know. So hopefully maybe one day the policy school may have a course on water policy issues as well. I mean, why not? Or even a workshop, you know, like a 1 week long thing. It doesn't have to be a credit-based course. It could be a workshop for bureaucrats and policymakers and all on how to look at water differently, you know. So I think those are conversations we'd like to see happening.
Yeah. So let me just pose a question to Sebastian, and there's a question also in the chat box. You may look at it and we'll take it later. Alicia, I will also invite you to speak. But Sebastian, coming from Management Institute, talking about governance, and I know that these two scholarships are already in a competing situation all the time. And then touching upon a soft aspect like water, because I mean, it has been a kind of a cry for me for last 20 years now that none of the IITs, none of the IIMs, none of the NIITs or other management institutes are really taking water as a subject so seriously. So one thing is water as a subject so seriously, and another thing is, even if the water is taken as a subject, the science part is so elaborative and ornamented that the art part of it not even gets attention and acknowledgement and appreciation. So I'm just trying to understand from you, what was the students experience after they engaged? What were your younger teachers experience after they went through this process with the scholars of Goa Water Stories? And how do you think institutes like Goa Institute of Management can really take this learning for future water education, and even for all IIMs and IITs? You may speak on their behalf, for as an individual, of course. Why not water education in different formats, apart from science also?
Yeah, I mean, you have posed a very interesting question. Um, you see, the management schools were not involved in things like electricity, energy, and so on.
Yes.
You see, the reason is it was dominated by the state.
Yeah.
But the moment the private sector began to get it, and electricity got privatized, corporates began to get interested. And that kind of forced, or let's say, encouraged the business schools to get into energy, electricity, and so on. And then, of course, with general privatization of infrastructure, onto other aspects, okay, like roads, ports, etc. So today, a huge amount of work is being done in many business schools, including IIM Ahmedabad, of which I'm familiar, in infrastructure, okay, particularly in energy, design of markets, changing organizations, how the regulation should be done. And I've been kind of involved in many of these. Now, the point is about water. Water still has not been, I'm not saying therefore water should be privatized. The main body that deals with water at an intellectual and constructive level, thinking, and the think tank for water in India is really the Central Water Commission. Okay, so I have engaged with them in training programs at the senior most levels. Now, they're all good engineers, okay, but the ability to deal with what I would call public value in water is very low, because they see a problem as a problem of engineering. Okay? They see a problem as a problem of minimizing cost. Often, when you don't minimize cost, but you pick, a total social cost approach, okay, and social benefit approach, a project can be much, much more ecologically sustaining and give you enormous
Absolutely.
value. Okay, so those kind of perspectives are alien to them. They're only beginning. And as you know, there's a huge water crisis in India. So many areas are dry, and much of it is actually a result of what I would call bad policy. Okay, so it's not a case where policy is there and it's poorly implemented. The policy itself can be very damaging. Okay, and then you have a national water policy, for instance, which is a kind of a table of platitudes without
Yes.
any real approach to how you're going to solve it. Now, I think beyond, you're absolutely right that beyond the government, uh, people and students and everybody else must get interested in water. Municipalities should get interested in water. It's of immediate value to them. I mean, if you can imagine, let us say a city like Patna or Pune making good use of the rivers that flow through it, you can imagine the huge amount of public and private value that it can generate. After all, where do people have to go? Why do people come to Goa? Because they just don't find a place which is open. And a waterfront is actually an open, a visual delight, because you can see into the distance without your eye being. Just the fact that you can see distance is of value to all humans. So the time has come actually for us to have major changes in policy. Okay? And that cannot happen without obviously dialogue and so on, without people bringing out all the ill effects that have happened, but in a way that is constructive. So if you take a very, Luddite position, we will not touch these resources, it can be very, very damaging. Let me give you one example and then I'll leave it. The government has responded to sand mining in the rivers, which was actually quite damaging, there's no doubt about it, by putting a ban. Okay? So, governments in India operate only when they have rules framed under a policy. So, policy in itself is of no use. The policy has to be formed into rules. So, the rules are constructed around categories, around definitions, around defined organizations, roles, etc. Now, sand mining is banned. Therefore, is silt mining banned? The answer is no. Okay, so therefore, a huge amount of silt mining, which is worse than sand mining, is actually happening right now in Goa. Okay, and it's not environmentally damaging because by definition it's not so, because it's not sand mining, it's silt mining. Okay, now this young student actually brought out from studying abroad. I forget her name. I should have remembered the name because it's her study. Now there are umpteen such situations where the environmental damage is built into the rules and regulations, but we can't challenge it. We as citizens cannot challenge it. We as citizens cannot challenge misuse because we don't have liability rules in India. So I can't go and say, hey, this whole silt mining is damaging the environment, is damaging me, because that's not the way it has been defined in the rules. Okay. So this
Yes.
shift that governments must be answerable to the public and the public must be able to challenge governments and claim compensation is something that needs to come. The day that happens, I'm sure, gradually but surely, we will not misuse our common resources.
I think you have raised a very interesting situation where find it as a chicken and egg situation. Government can be only challenged when people are aware about what to challenge and what is good or what is not good for them and for environment. And government can actually also seek people's cooperation or participation when the right people are in the government. Those who, so it is eventually it comes back to education and education. So reform is only by education. Let me just go to a quick question to Ria, because I'm going to have more opportunities with Ria in the future sessions. And I want to tell everyone that each of the stories are going to be taken up by all the scholars and artists. I mean, I don't know whether I should call them scholars, artists, or actually artists and scholars. And they are going to tell their stories from next session onwards. Today is the introduction session. And Ria, you have already spent your major part of professional life talking about saving the rivers of Goa. And I remember from your last Friday Water Art session, when you had really created public art through public engagement, and that was your own work earlier, and now you have worked in a team. How do you feel from where you had started as a solo traveler of water community? I mean, to build a water community, and now here at least you have a water community with whom you can sit and talk about Goa waters, even if you may not solve every problem of Goa, but at least you have a community which can increase, which can discuss, which can resist. Because I still remember your beautiful pictures of local community expressing their resistance to save their rivers. Where do you find yourself after a decade of your hard work?
Wow. Okay. But so firstly, I would say like even with the community art, that happened, which was through Nai, that was their art. It was not mine.
Yes.
I was just
Yes.
facilitating it. So it was always theirs. It is theirs. But it's good to see. So from when we started, sort of, that was more of an abstraction, I would say. It was more feelings. It was more for people to vent onto, um, express their sort of, we had asked 3 questions, which was their memory, their knowledge, and their vision for the river. But with something like this, and we focused on only the Mandovi, of course, different sections of the Mandovi we focused on. With something like this, we're looking at sort of mapping the ecosystem of Goa, so to say, in several aspects of water. So we have like it's nice to see like it's very inspiring to see there are stories on tourism, there are stories on flora, there's stories on certain type of fauna like the shells and what those shells are used. It's very diverse. So it's amazing to be a part of something that has so many layers also, and just to also just tackle a little bit of what Alicia had asked. The change takes a lot of time. It's not like you could be working in this field for many years, and to actually see change, and change is defined by in different ways. So even if you take a group of students and you yourself go to actually see the edge of the river, and you internalize something in your mind, and you go home and you sketch about it, and you make a little comic strip about it, you in fact have already internalized something that's going to stay with you for a long time. So the next time you have a site or you are designing close to the river, you're not going to look at it the same way again. And that in itself sort of makes you reflect. And when you see it, and because, as architects, sometimes we're only looking at the visual. Sometimes you have to pause, you have to listen to the sound. What is this fairy sound that's happening? What is the gurgling of the water? And there were some students, just to give you one example, who had never been they'd known there was a spring in the heart of the city, but never actually walked behind it, never seen the little spouts behind the hill that where the water was coming from. And that happened to be the source of water for Panjim for many years before we had the convenience of taps being switched on into everyone's home, and then you disconnect from where your water is actually coming from. So, and then also to realize that the water that Panjim receives is from Opa, which is on the source of the closer to the source of the Dudhsag of the Khandepa River. That water is coming into Panjim. That's the same water. To sort of reflect and understand when you're designing a washroom or a kitchen, that's where your water is coming from. So, be a little more sensitive in the fittings you use, and that the change is not so direct and so obvious all the time. So yeah. So yeah,
But I'm sure, yeah, go ahead.
no. Yes.
Okay, but I'm seeing the building of this community, and I really want to hold on to that question also for my future sessions with all the scholars,
Yes.
artists of Goa Water Stories. Alicia, would you like to unmute yourself and maybe elaborate a bit or engage? That would be nice. Yeah.
Hi. So I think a lot of the speakers, Sarah and Ria and Sebastian, have already sort of touched on the first part of the question. Like Ria said, I realize that change does take time, but I'm asking this because I've come from sort of a campaigns background. So it's just out of curiosity, I wanted to know, does the project go further in sort of enabling people to take steps to interact with policymakers who could make change possible? And I know Sebastian talked about the increasing need for dialogue, because I recognize storytelling is a big part of changing your mindset, but you sort of have to put this into policy for it to have more wider ranging impact. So that is why I was sort of asking about next steps sort of the project, or whether it's limiting itself to sort of just being this sort of storytelling tool. And then, of course, what barriers it faces in the current climate.
Sarah,
So I'll answer, but
Yes.
I'll have to leave also soon, Mansee.
Yes, we are
So
closing.
hi, Alicia. don't know who you are or where you are. Hopefully that comes up somewhere. But just to say that it's still early days. The website was only finalized and launched in March, actually at a meeting at ICER in Pune, which Mansee and Watersy attended, and that was the Water Commons, Water as Commons, conversations, dialogue, etc. That was a meeting that brought together 50 or more activists around water issues across India. I mean, in a way, we were speaking amongst people, who shared similar world views and value systems. But Living Waters Museum is also engaged in other museum making, decolonizing museum making practices in river basins in India, but also with partners on the Blue Nile and on the Volta River. So a lot of the learning and the creation of the website and how we did Goa is also feeding into and inspiring other pieces of work. We're also developing an online course on water culture and science at ICER and our partners at IHE in Delft. That's the Institute for Hydrology Education, and the IIT in Kharagpur. So I do see a lot that will happen on education. I think taking it into galleries and physical spaces and schools and, the art world also requires funding. And that's going to be the biggest thing, How do we continue to support local champions like Watersy, all contributors and all? How do we do all of that? Where do we get that funding from? So right now, there isn't much available. And I think that's going to be something that we will have to look at and see how we can drive that change happening. So, things that can be done, which are low cost, which are feasible, which, involve conversations or a development of an online course where faculty time is already built into a project, all those things can happen, and that is happening, But I think it's also incumbent on the institutional partners like Goa University and the School for Public Policy at GIM to also help us think through ways in which we can engage with policymakers on water. I think that's important. We were writing a policy paper, like a brief on this whole thing on water for a book that Sebastian and his team were working on, an edited volume, but I'm not sure that we've got very far with that. We keep getting asked to write things, but that's also something we struggle with sometimes. But I do see change happening, Alicia, because when Living Waters Museum started in 2017, 2016, actually, there weren't a lot of people talking about the role of the arts in terms of, emotion, social change, right? I come from a world of water, so does Mansee. We've all worked on these issues of governance and gender and equity. But over the last 7 years, I've been working with design schools like NID, or an institution like CEPT in Ahmedabad, or Ahmedabad University, or conservation architects and others. And I think that bringing together those kind of people with academics rooted in water science and humanities and water, and I think that's been really, really important for us. And now I do see a lot of interest in water and the arts and climate change in the arts and in youth taking on this work, not just in India, but around the world. We're seeing, even the United Nations in its, water decade and whatever else it's doing on water has acknowledged the role of the arts in terms of furthering the message on water. And also something else that wasn't talked about in many of these water forums was the role, was how do we learn from our ancient hydro technologies? Ria mentioned the spring, but there are many other things. There are the bishtis that, sell water in not only in India, but across Central Asia. In Marrakesh, I've seen versions of that happening. There are ancient aqueducts and systems like the Kataras in the deserts. And, so there are a lot of these ancient hydro technologies that are still in use. And as a global network, we're also very keen on looking at and understanding how societies have adapted. And that, I think, that idea of water and heritage and what can we learn from the past and from our histories, that is something also that is now infiltrating the water space.
Yeah.
Wasn't there earlier. I mean, no one talked about history or, fountains and public fountains or philanthropy around water or, all of that. But now I see that discourse is really taking shape. So change happens slowly, incrementally. Living Waters Museum never started as a big bang thing. We've grown through opportunities that have opened up things for us, but that's how it happened. I hope I've answered some of your questions.
Also, I think I'll add to what Sarah mentioned, Alicia, just to answer a little bit. And also, I would like Sebastian to just throw a very small lines or insights on this matter. Every individual or organization or everyone has a limited scope to contribute. I mean, I can just give you an example, Alicia, that when I'm teaching urban lakes, I have always faced this question from my students, ma'am, why don't you go and do something? So we are actually proponents of action, and there are very few proponents of knowledge. And that is where the role of institutions like Goa Water Management, Goa Institute of Management, I'm already saying Goa Water Management Institute, getting too ambitious with it, Sebastian. But now, I think this is where the role of institutions becomes extremely crucial to make this kind of alternate education and knowledge, which is already done by efforts of other people. Now, how to bridge, how these institutions can bridge it and bring it to the policy table. I mean, I think institutions are much more empowered than individuals, as Sarah is doing through in her own capacity. Sebastian, how do you think, now that you have such a wonderful repository of Goa water stories, where are our policymakers standing? And do you think they have their ears and eyes to appreciate? Because the entire focus of today's water management in India is water crisis management, and not really water appreciation or acknowledgement situation, like from history, from today, from arts, from technology. We are constantly in the race to manage crisis, but not really taking a step back or aside to appreciate water first as a resource, as a source of life, as a spiritual connect. Where do you think this kind of repository can be really brought to the table, if not, even if we don't get success, but at least to bring it to the table of policymakers and make them rethink about the way water is looked at?
I think there can be various ways. Okay, one is I see the the change in policy happening not just by considering the government as a formal client or an agency to which you say, okay, hey, I've done this work. It could be research also, and please listen to that.
Yes.
See, it's not just that, because government itself has become a kind of a public. When I say government, all the people who are there, and they are influenced by all kinds of influences. So if you look at the government today, they have taken a stance which is, look, here are all the environmentalists worrying us. They don't know what they're talking about, and to a large extent, in their own language, given their own perspective as engineers, that might be true. That maybe environmentalists don't understand volumes and those kind of things. Material balances the way they do. So it's a situation where the environmental aspect in rivers, in water, in nature, in forests is something which is a thing to be got rid of. Okay, let me meet the criteria. It's something to be ticked off. So there is no real understanding that, look, I must look at anything, whatever I'm doing as a government, from the point of view of the public, from the point of view of value. Okay? So we often say that governments should coordinate in India, okay, but they don't, for the simple reason that they're all protecting their own turf. Okay, and if you're protecting your own turf and you are not critical of each other, then how can you actually coordinate? Okay.
Absolutely.
The only way coordination can come is if they think in terms of public value. So that's a very major change which needs to happen. It can only happen, taking maybe decades. But my point is that, that there is something amiss, that there is something seriously wrong with the way we are officially dealing with water, is an idea that has to rise and become something that is commonly accepted, that is ubiquitous, so that then these agenda can come in the newspaper.
Absolutely.
When they come, it's a kind of, polar polar thing. Environmentalists have opposed, these guys want to do it. So always environmentalists are posed as anti-developmentalists and Luddites and so on. And hey, how the hell can we progress if we can't do mining, if we can't do water exploitation? Okay. And therefore, let's do something at least to get it going. Now, if you look at mining, that's another area which it's entirely
Yeah, we wish to have a session on mining also, to be
so what I'm
honest.
saying is that there are these are common problems, and therefore water is seen as something extractive. So the way forward is this goes into the public knowledge. That's most important.
Yes, I think
Next is, it can actually serve as an inspiration to selected group of civil servants. Instead of taking them to a Bharatnatyam dance, let us say, as entertainment, why not take them through a living waters in a museum, through the presentation, where maybe somebody who's very good in communication can come and talk to them and show them these slides. Okay. I remember, when we took people, CWC and engineers, in way back in Ahmedabad, to the water projects out there, you know there was a much greater appreciation of the role of water, which went beyond their usual ideas of dams and channels of irrigation or of power projects. Okay. So it's possible. I mean, I'm saying that many channels are there. Okay.
yeah. So yes, of course, it is possible, and I mean, I'm sure in your life, professional lifetime, Sarah, you yourself, and even I am seeing in 30 years of working on lakes, things have changed. They are slow, but things are changing. And I think the challenge that we have taken up, like people like Sarah, me, Sebastian, and many more in the W4W community, we have many more of them, is to now really bring the youth on board and expand this water community. Should we wish to acknowledge first and then appreciate, and then maybe talk about the crisis. We will have a lot of these talks on Goa water stories over next few months. The next Goa Water Story Friday Water Arts is on May 23rd, and again at 5 p.m. IST, and the information is already there. Next week, we are going ahead with our signature series, Wednesdays for Water, a very interesting topic, a scientific topic on Wednesday. Of course, I don't discriminate between science and arts, but because history tells that art has been the major reformer of the society. But Wednesdays for Water is more of a panel discussion where we discuss. Next time on May 14th, we are discussing water toxicity and treatment, and we are focusing on Rajasthan that time. The joining link is also there. Next week, we have Friday Water Thesis Club. As I said, Friday Waters are always very enriching with different sessions. It's on May 16th, and we have a student from Arizona, from University of Arizona, Tucson, and he's going to talk about role of gender in water, peace, and security. Our very dear Kashmiri boy, and studying and doing his postdoc. And I'm looking forward to all these sessions. Please stay tuned with us, and thanks once again to Living Waters Museum for this wonderful collaboration. You have been there, Sarah, earlier also doing Friday Water Arts for us. And I'm really looking forward to be with you all the life, not only as a mentor, but as a dear friend. And thanks, Uttara, for taking us through the website. And I hope, Uttara, you also join us sometime in speaking, because I would love to hear from you, someone who came after the Goa Water Stories, and how you are grasping the beautiful ideas, and where do you take it from here. Thank you so much, Sebastian, and I look forward to having you in one more session, at least on mining and water. And stay tuned, all of you, at www.w4w.in, and stay healthy, stay safe. We are going through rough times, and I hope we are going to see peace very soon. Thank you so much, all of you. Please take it. Take
Thanks,
care.
Mansee and
Bye-bye.
Ria.
Thank you, Mansee.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mansee.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.